The sky above New York tore open like skin under a blade. No warning, no cosmic herald, just a sound, low, grinding, wrong, that made every living thing within 50 miles freeze where it stood. The rupture spread across the sky in jagged black lines, spiderwebbing outward from a point directly above Manhattan. Reality split. Through the wound came light that had no business existing. Sickly green, corpse pale, older than stars. Then came the cold. Not winter cold, void cold. The kind that reaches through walls and skin and bone and touches something deeper. Car alarms died mid-scream. Electronics sparked and went dark across 3 boroughs. In the sudden silence, people looked up and saw Earth. Another Earth, impossibly close. Continents visible in horrible detail, but wrong, burned, cratered, lit by cities so massive they glowed like wounds across the night side, and moving closer. The air itself began to scream as 2 planets violated every law that said they shouldn't occupy the same space. Tony Stark was in his Malibu workshop when every sensor he owned shrieked at once. By the time he pulled up the satellite feeds, the anomaly was already 15 miles wide and growing. He watched 2 versions of Earth beginning an impossible collision. Not physical, something else. Something that made his instruments weep corrupted data. And for the first time in years, Tony Stark had absolutely no idea what he was looking at. Steve Rogers felt it in his chest. A pressure, a wrongness. He was 3 steps out of a SHIELD briefing room when the building's windows all shattered inward at once. No explosion, no attack. Just every piece of glass in the building deciding simultaneously that inside was better than outside. He covered his face, heard agents screaming, and when he looked up through the broken window, he saw it. Another world, pressed against their sky like a face against glass. Doctor Strange was already moving. The eye of Agamotto burned cold against his chest. He opened a portal and stepped through into the New York sanctum, just as Wong stumbled backward from a window, face bloodless. "Stephen," Wong whispered. "The barriers are breaking. All of them. I can feel things on the other side. Old things. Hungry things." Strange looked past him at the sky. "Get everyone," Strange said quietly. "This isn't an invasion." "Then what?" "It's a merger." The sky continued to tear. Through the wound, the other Earth loomed closer. And on that other Earth, in the ruins of what had once been called London, a vast fortress monastery registered the impossible readings. Alarms sang through halls built to withstand planetary bombardment. Armored giants moved with practiced speed toward their weapons. And in the depths of the monastery, a figure in ancient power armor looked up at data screens, showing something that should not exist. Captain Dante of the Blood Angels had lived for 1100 years. He had seen horrors that would shatter mortal minds. He had fought on 1,000 worlds against every enemy the galaxy could produce. He had never seen 2 planets trying to become one. "All companies to ready stations," he said, his voice amplified through the Vox network. "We have contact with an unknown variable. Threat level, absolute. In orbit above the Warhammer Earth, larger things were waking up. Warships the size of cities. Defense platforms that could crack continents. And deeper in the void, monitoring stations picked up the readings and began emergency transmissions toward distant segmentums of the Imperium. The message was simple. Terra has a twin, and it's getting closer." Both Earths screamed as they touched. The merge wasn't an explosion. It was a slow, impossible interpenetration. 2 realities forced into the same space through a mechanism that violated every physical law either universe understood. The process took 6 hours. It felt like 6 years. For the first hour, both Earths existed in a quantum overlap. People on Marvel Earth looked up and saw continents from the other world superimposed over their own, like a double-exposed photograph. Cities occupying the same geographic space as burned Hive wastelands. Forests layered over industrial sprawl that stretched to horizons. Then reality made a choice. The merge completed with a sound like a door slamming shut across an entire planet. When it finished, there was only one Earth. But it was wrong. Stitched together from both worlds in a patchwork that made no sense. Central Park ended abruptly at the edge of a ferrocrete wall 50 meters high. The Atlantic Ocean crashed against shores that belonged to different continents. Mount Everest jutted up next to the ruins of a Hive city that had died 10,000 years ago. And in the spaces between, where the seams showed, reality was thin, dangerous. Tony Stark stood in his armor on top of Stark Tower and tried to make sense of the readings. The city below was chaos. Some buildings from both Earths had merged, creating impossible architecture. Others had simply been displaced, gone, replaced by structures from the other world. He could see 3 blocks away where a Starbucks ended and some kind of fortified chapel began. All Gothic arches and human skulls worked into the masonry. "Jarvis, tell me something useful." "I cannot, sir. Our satellites show land masses that don't match any known geography. Our position appears to be approximately where New York should be, but the surrounding terrain is inconsistent." "Inconsistent how?" "North of the city, I detect what appears to be the Atlantic Ocean. South, a mountain range that should not exist. West, forests. East, an industrial zone approximately 400 square kilometers in size. None of these geographic features should be adjacent." Tony zoomed his helmet's optics toward the industrial zone. Even from this distance, he could see it was wrong. The factories were too big, the smoke was the wrong color, and nothing was moving. "Life signs. Abundant throughout the merged areas, sir, but concentrated in specific zones. I'm detecting energy signatures I cannot classify. Some of them are considerable." That's when Tony's radar lit up. "Contact. Incoming fast from the northeast. Multiple bogies." He spun, repulsors charging. The figures came in low over the water. 6 of them, humanoid, armored, but not with any technology Tony recognized. They moved with jump packs, crude, roaring things that sounded like jet engines having seizures. As they got closer, Tony's sensors started feeding him data that couldn't be right. Each figure was enormous, 8 feet tall, minimum. The armor was thick, ceramic and metal, painted deep red. They carried weapons that looked like oversized rifles, but the power signatures coming off them registered somewhere between an anti-tank gun and a plasma cutter, and they were aiming at him. Tony raised both hands, palms out. Universal gesture, not hostile. The figures landed on buildings surrounding the tower in a perimeter formation that was absolutely, unmistakably military, professional. They kept their weapons trained on him but didn't fire. One of them raised a hand to the side of his helmet. A voice crackled through Tony's external speakers, low, distorted through a helmet vox, clipped, formal, with an accent Tony couldn't place. Unidentified contact. "You will identify yourself and state your allegiance." Tony's mind raced. These weren't military from his Earth. Wrong equipment, wrong doctrine. That meant they were from the other one. First contact. Everything he said in the next 30 seconds mattered. "My name is Tony Stark. Well, the closest analog would be a defender of this city. I'm not your enemy. I don't even know who you are." Silence. The armored figures didn't move, didn't lower their weapons. Tony's sensors picked up encrypted communication between them. tight beam, sophisticated. These people weren't primitives. You wear powered armor, the voice said. You bear weapons, but you are not Astartes, not guard, not any pattern we recognize. The city below shows signs of your technology. Primitive, but functional. Are you a planetary defense force? Something like that. Tony kept his voice calm. Look, I don't know what happened. 6 hours ago, there was only one Earth. My Earth. Then the sky split open and, you know what? You saw it too. You know exactly what happened. So how about, instead of pointing guns at each other, we figure out what the hell is going on? Another pause. Then, remain where you are. Do not attempt to flee or raise weapons. You will be approached. One of the figures launched from his perch and landed on Stark Tower with an impact that cracked the rooftop. Up close, the figure was even more intimidating. The armor was a masterwork. Ceramite plating, Tony's sensors told him. Though that material shouldn't exist. Reinforced joints, integrated weapons systems, and inside, the biological readings were off the charts. Massive bone density, 3 hearts. Blood that registered as partially acidic. This wasn't a man in armor. This was something else. The figure was a head taller than Tony's armor. He moved with controlled precision, weapon held in a ready position that could snap to target in a fraction of a second. The helmet's eye lenses glowed a dull red. I am Brother Sergeant Cassian of the Blood Angels, 3rd Company. We detected the anomaly 6 hours ago. Our entire world experienced the merge. We do not know the mechanism. We do not know if it is enemy action. But we will determine the truth. You will answer questions. Tony's HUD was screaming warnings about the weapon pointed at his chest. The energy signature was off the charts. One shot from that thing would crack his armor like an eggshell. Happy to cooperate, Tony said. But I've got questions too. Starting with, what the hell is a blood angel? Across the merged Earth, similar encounters were happening. In what had been Washington, D.C., now partially overlapped with the ruins of a dead Hive city, shield forces had established a perimeter around the Capitol building. Director Nick Fury stood in a mobile command center staring at screens, showing impossible geography. His agents were reporting contact with survivors from the other Earth, human, mostly, but different. The people wore rags mostly, or uniforms that looked military but wrong, heavy coats, gas masks, armor made of flak plates and desperation. They carried rifles that fired solid slugs, loud, crude, effective, and every single one of them looked at Fury's people like they expected betrayal or death or both. One of them, a woman with a sergeant's stripes and a scar across her face, had been brought in for questioning. She sat across from Fury in the command center, hands zip-tied. She hadn't resisted, eyes wary. Name and rank, Fury said. Sergeant Kira Venlos, Cadian 8th Regiment. Serial. She rattled off a string of numbers that meant nothing to Fury. Cadian. Homeworld. Was. Cadia stands. She said it like a prayer, or a lie she needed to believe. You're a soldier. Was, am. The regiment was deployed to the defense of Terra. Then, she gestured vaguely at the walls. Then this. The world went mad. The sky split. When it ended, everything was different. My unit scattered. I've been trying to find them for 3 hours. Fury studied her. She was young, mid-20s maybe, but her eyes were older. He'd seen that look before. Combat veterans. People who'd seen things that left marks. Terra, Fury said. That's what you call Earth. Terra is the throne world, heart of the Imperium, humanity's cradle. She frowned. You don't know this. What world are you from? This world. Earth. Always called it Earth. Her frown deepened. That's Terra. The Emperor's seat. Unless... Her eyes widened. You're from the other side. The other Terra. The one that merged with ours. Looks that way. She leaned back, hands still bound, and laughed. It was not a happy sound. Emperor's teeth. 2 Terras. The Administratum is going to lose its mind. Do you have any idea what kind of paperwork nightmare this is? Despite everything, Fury almost smiled. Bureaucracy was universal, apparently. Tell me about your world, Fury said. Your Imperium, your Emperor. Sergeant Venlos talked for 20 minutes. By the end, Fury needed a drink. He didn't pour one. Instead, he listened to the sergeant describe a galaxy at war, an Imperium spanning 1,000,000 worlds, enemies beyond counting, and an emperor, their emperor, who'd been sitting on a golden throne, barely alive for 10,000 years, burning through the souls of psychics just to keep the lights on. This Imperium, Fury said carefully, it's humanity. All that's left of it. Everything else is hostile or food or both. And this emperor of yours, he's some kind of... what, dictator? The sergeant's face went cold. He is the master of mankind, the omniscire, the anathema. Without him we die, all of us. The galaxy swallows us whole. Fury filed that away under religious fanaticism and moved on. Your weapons, your technology, how advanced. The command center shook. Alarm screamed. Fury was on his feet in an instant, screens showing new contacts. Big ones, coming from the north. Sir, an agent's voice crackled through the comms. We have movement. Multiple heavy signatures. They're not human. Fury grabbed a tablet, pulled up the feed. The camera showed a street 30 blocks north, empty a moment ago, now filling with shapes that moved wrong. Organic, chitinous. They skittered and loped, and some of them flew on wings that looked grown, not built. Sergeant Venlos saw the screen and went pale. Oh, throne. No, not here. Not on Terra. What are those things? Tyranids, she whispered. The great devourer. If they're here, if they've merged too. She looked at Fury with something close to pity. Your world just became a war zone, and you have no idea what's coming. The Avengers had assembled in what remained of their tower. The building had partially merged with some kind of fortified monastery from the other Earth. Gothic, ancient, covered in religious iconography that made Steve Rogers uncomfortable. They gathered in a conference room that now had stained glass windows, showing battles Steve didn't recognize. Tony arrived last, armor still on, and immediately started talking. Okay, sit rep. The world is broken. We've got visitors from another Earth that apparently lives in a nightmare galaxy. I met some. They're called Space Marines, super soldiers. Make Cap look like a weekend warrior. Enhanced on a genetic level. Power armor that makes my suit look like a science fair project. And they're not the scariest thing out there. How much scarier does it get? Natasha asked. Tony pulled up holographic displays. Jarvis compiled intel from every sensor we have. The answer is way scarier. I'm detecting what looks like orbital platforms, weapons platforms. Some of them are the size of cities. There are ships in low orbit. No idea how they got there. Probably merged the same way everything else did. And they're huge. Cathedral ships, warships. Some of them registering energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. Any communication? Steve asked. Plenty. None of it in English. Jarvis is working on translation, but it's slow. These people don't use digital communication like we do. A lot of their signals are, I don't know how to describe it, ritualistic, encrypted with prayers. Bruce Banner spoke up from the corner. I've been reviewing footage of the merge. The energy signatures match nothing in our physics. This wasn't technology. It was something else, and it's left residue, dimensional weak points, places where the barrier between our reality and something else is thin. Something else meaning what? Clint asked. I don't know, but the readings remind me of the Tesseract, like the Bifrost, doorways to other dimensions, except these aren't stable. They're leaking. Thor stood near the window, staring out at the transformed skyline. He'd been silent since arriving. Now he spoke, and his voice was troubled. I know this feeling, this cold. I have felt it before, in the darkest corners of the 9 realms. This is the touch of beings that should not be, powers that prey on thought and fear. You're saying magic? Tony asked. I am saying there are forces in this universe beyond science, and I sense them here, growing stronger. A proximity alarm cut the conversation short. New arrival. Fast. Strange opened a portal directly into the room. Wong beside him, both looking grim. We have a problem, Strange said without preamble. The merge has torn holes in the dimensional barriers around Earth. I can feel things on the other side, watching, hungry, and it gets worse. How? Steve asked. I made contact with a psychic from the other Earth. Barely survived the conversation. Their universe has a parallel dimension they call the warp. It's a realm of pure psychic energy, emotion given form, and it's full of things that want to crawl through into reality. Stranger's hands were shaking. Those things are already here. Small breaches, minor possessions, but it's spreading. The other Earth people have defenses against this. Religious wards, psychic barriers, things I barely understand. We don't. So we learn, Steve said simply. Captain, you don't understand. The entities in the warp are gods. Not metaphorical, actual, literal gods. Formed from the psychic weight of emotion across an entire galaxy. Rage, plague, excess, ambition. They are functionally infinite, and they eat souls for breakfast. The room went very quiet. Right, Tony said finally. So, Tuesday. In the merged sections of what had been London, Captain Dante stood in the reclusium of the Blood Angels Fortress Monastery and tried to make sense of his situation. The building had merged with structures from the other Earth, civilian buildings, museums, infrastructure that seemed absurdly fragile. One wall of the reclusium now opened onto what appeared to be an art gallery. He'd sent scouts throughout the area. The reports were consistent. The local population was human, but unaugmented. Baseline, fragile. They had technology, but it was primitive. No warp travel, no Geller fields. They didn't even know about chaos. How had they survived? Brother Domitius entered the reclusium, his armor's servos whirring. My lord, we've established contact with local leadership. They call themselves SHIELD, some form of planetary defense force. They request a meeting. Their capabilities? Uncertain. Preliminary scans show advanced technology by baseline standards. Nuclear weapons, satellite networks, crude AI. Nothing that would threaten the Imperium, but, my lord, they show no signs of chaos corruption. None. I've scanned thousands of the local population. Their souls are bright, unclaimed. It's as if they've never been exposed, Dante finished. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. An entire Earth, billions of souls, all untouched by chaos. This is either the Emperor's greatest gift or our worst nightmare. My lord, if the ruinous powers learn of this world, a world of pure, uncorrupted souls, they will come, all of them, in force. Dante turned to face his brother. We need to contact the Administratum. We need reinforcements. And we need to teach these people how to defend themselves against threats they don't even know exist. Shall I establish contact with the locals? Yes. And Domitius? Be gentle. They've never seen Astartes before. We must not appear as conquerors. The meeting happened in a neutral zone. What had been Central Park, now partially merged with a sacred grove from the other earth. Ancient trees growing next to oak and maple. The ground was a patchwork of grass and stone pathways. On one side, Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, and Doctor Strange. Behind them, a contingent of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. On the other, Captain Dante of the Blood Angels, accompanied by 2 other Space Marines and a figure in robes who'd been introduced as Chaplain Moria. The 2 groups faced each other across 20 meters of merged ground. Neither side had weapons drawn, but everyone was ready. Steve Rogers stepped forward first. Old habit. He'd negotiated with Asgardians, aliens, enhanced individuals. This couldn't be much different. Then he got a good look at Captain Dante and reconsidered. The Space Marine commander was tall, even taller than his subordinates. The armor was ancient, covered in purity seals and battle honors. The face beneath the helmet was aged but not weak, sharp, calculating. Eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Captain Rogers, Dante said. His voice was surprisingly soft. I'm told you lead the defenders of this city. One of them, Steve replied. We don't really do ranks the way you might be used to. A volunteer force, something like that. Dante nodded slowly. Then we are not so different. The Blood Angels serve by choice as much as duty. He gestured to the city around them. I will speak plainly. This merge was not our doing. We do not know the mechanism, but it has placed both our worlds in danger. Agreed, Steve said. We're hoping to work together to... You do not understand. Dante's voice remained soft but carried weight. Your world has been exposed. The merge has left tears in reality. Weak points. Things will come through. Things that feed on fear and pain and dreams. Your people have no defenses against them. Tony spoke up. We've handled alien invasions before. We'll manage. Chaplain Moria made a sound that might have been a laugh or a prayer. You have fought physical enemies, mortals. The threats facing us now are not mortal. They are eternal. They are corruption given form, and they are already here. Strange stepped forward. I felt them. The entities you call chaos. Every Space Marine went still. Dante's hand dropped to his weapon. How do you know that name? I'm a sorcerer, a practitioner of magic. I can sense the dimensional breaches, the things on the other side. Strange met Dante's gaze, and I know we can't fight them the way you do. Your world has had 10,000 years to develop defenses, wards, rituals, faith shields. We have none of that. The tension stretched. Then Dante removed his helmet. His face was lined, scarred, weary beyond measure. He looked at Strange with something that might have been respect. Then we teach you, Dante said quietly, because if we do not, both our worlds will fall. The ruinous powers will not distinguish between your Earth and ours. They will consume all. Steve felt the weight of that statement. What do you need from us? Information, resources, and faith. Dante's expression was grim. You are about to learn that some wars cannot be won with weapons alone. Some enemies live in the space between thoughts, and the only shield against them is belief. Belief in what? Natasha asked. Dante looked at the sky, where the sun was setting behind clouds that weren't quite the right color anymore. In anything, he said, as long as you believe it absolutely. Because in our universe, faith has power, and doubt is a doorway. The meeting continued for another hour. Terms were set. Intelligence would be shared. The Space Marines would provide information about threats. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers would help coordinate civilian evacuation and defense. It was a fragile alliance, built on mutual necessity. As the group separated, Steve found himself walking beside Captain Dante. "Your world," Steve said. "How long has it been at war?" 10,000 years, without pause. And before that? 10,000 years of conquest to unite humanity. Before that? Dante shrugged. Old night, isolation, chaos. Humanity has never known peace, Captain Rogers. Not truly. We survive by fighting. It is all we know. Steve thought about that. About a galaxy where war was the default state, where peace was not just rare but impossible. "That's no way to live," he said quietly. Dante looked at him with eyes that had seen 1,100 years of war. "No," he agreed. "It is not, but it is how we survive." They parted without another word. Steve rejoined his team. Tony was already pulling up tactical displays. Strange was muttering about walled patterns. Natasha was coordinating with S.H.I.E.L.D. Above them, the sky darkened. In the distance, something howled. It didn't sound natural. Didn't sound like any animal Steve had ever heard. It sounded hungry. "All right," Steve said to his team. "Let's get to work. We've got a lot to learn and not much time." In orbit, automated defense stations from the Warhammer Earth detected new signals, jump signatures, ships transitioning from the warp into real space. Not many, not yet, but coming. The war had found them. The first Chaos incursion happened in what used to be Detroit. The city had merged with an abandoned industrial sector from the Warhammer Earth. Factorums that had been dead for centuries, left to rust after whatever had worked there was long gone or dead. The merge created a labyrinth of collapsed buildings and twisted metal, a place where reality was already thin, a place where something could push through. It started with the dreams. 50,000 people in the merge zone woke up screaming on the same night. S.H.I.E.L.D's monitoring stations registered a spike in psychiatric emergencies. Hospitals filled with people clawing at their own skin, babbling about voices in the walls, eyes in the shadows, something watching from behind the world. By dawn, the first possessions had begun. Detective Marcus Cole was one of the first responders. He'd been Detroit PD for 15 years, seen gang violence, riots, the worst humanity had to offer. Nothing prepared him for what he found in the basement of a merged apartment complex. The family of 4 had barricaded themselves inside. Neighbors reported screaming. When Cole and his partner kicked the door in, they found the father standing over the bodies of his wife and children. Blood everywhere. The man was smiling. His eyes were wrong, too dark, like looking into deep water at night. "He's in my head," the man said conversationally. "He tells me such beautiful things about flesh and pain and the music they make together." Cole's partner raised his weapon. "Sir, get on the ground." The man moved faster than any human should. He crossed 5 feet in a heartbeat, hands closing around the partner's throat. Cole fired 3 rounds center mass. The man didn't even flinch, just kept squeezing until something in the partner's neck cracked. Cole ran, made it to his car, called it in. By the time backup arrived, the possessed man had killed 4 more people and was walking through to the street, singing something in a language that hurt to hear. It took a SWAT team to bring him down. 30 rounds. He kept moving until blood loss finally shut down the body. When the coroner examined him later, they found symbols carved into the inside of his skull. From the inside. That was just the first one. By the end of the second day, S.H.I.E.L.D. had confirmed 83 cases of possession in the Detroit zone. The number was climbing. Worse, the possessed were organizing. They moved together, coordinated. They were building something in the ruins, Altars made of bodies and scrap metal, arranged in patterns that made people's eyes water to look at. Nick Fury stood in a mobile command post 20 miles outside the quarantine zone and listened to reports that made less sense by the hour. "We've got civilians reporting hallucinations," Agent Hill said. "Seeing things that aren't there, hearing voices. Some of them are self-mutilating. Others are attacking emergency responders. The pattern matches what the Blood Angels warned us about. Chaos corruption," Fury said flatly. "If that's what we're calling it, yes sir." Fury pulled up a tactical map. The contaminated zone was spreading, slowly but measurably, like a stain growing outward from Detroit center. Evacuation status: stalled. "We're trying to move 200,000 people out of the area, but the panic is making it impossible. Traffic's gridlocked. People are fighting each other to get out, and some of them," Hill hesitated, "some of them don't want to leave. They say it's beautiful in there. They say they can hear music. Get me Captain Dante." The Blood Angel commander arrived by Thunderhawk gunship 20 minutes later. The aircraft was a brutal thing. All armor and weapons, no concession to aesthetics. It landed in the command post's clearing with a roar that rattled windows. Dante emerged with 2 other Space Marines and Chaplain Moria. "Show me," Dante said without preamble. Fury pulled up the live feeds. Dante watched in silence as the cameras showed possessed civilians building their altars, spreading corruption through touch and whisper and dream. When the footage ended, Dante's expression was stone. "Slaanesh," he said. "The Prince of Pleasure. The corruption spreads through sensation and desire. It offers beauty and reveals horror. Your people have no resistance to it. Can it be stopped? Yes, but the method will be hard for you to accept. Try me." Dante met his gaze. "We must purge the infected zone completely, every structure, every person who has been exposed. We burn it to bedrock and salt the earth." Fury's jaw tightened. "We're talking about American citizens, innocents. You are talking about hosts for demonic corruption, vectors for a plague that will not stop until it has consumed your entire world." Dante's voice remained calm. "Matter of fact, I have fought chaos for 1100 years, Director Fury. I know how this ends if you hesitate. The corruption spreads. It jumps quarantine. In a month, your entire continent is a war zone. In a year, your species is extinct or worse, enslaved to the dark gods. There has to be another way." "There is not." Chaplain Moria stepped forward. "Director, I understand your reluctance, but you must understand, these are not your people anymore. The moment they opened themselves to the whispers, they became weapons aimed at everyone they love. The kindest thing you can do is end it quickly." Fury looked at Hill. She looked away. He looked at the monitors showing refugees streaming out of Detroit, families carrying children, everything they owned in cars and bags. And behind them, the spreading darkness. "I need to clear this with the World Security Council," Fury said finally. "You do not have time," Dante said. "The corruption grows exponentially. Every hour we wait, 100 more fall. We must act now. I'm not authorizing the death of thousands of people without oversight. Then you do millions." Dante turned away. "Chaplain Moria, prepare the purge teams. We will contain this with or without S.H.I.E.L.D.'s cooperation." "Captain Dante," the Space Marine stopped. "Look back. Director Fury, I respect your morality, your desire to save everyone. But in war against chaos, that desire is a weakness they will exploit. They are already inside your people's heads. They are learning your fears, your dreams, your weaknesses. And they are patient. If you cannot make the hard choice, I will make it for you. Because I have seen what happens when chaos goes unchallenged. I have walked on worlds, where every living thing was twisted into screaming monuments to the dark gods. I will not allow that to happen again. Fury watched him go. Hill spoke quietly. Sir, he's right. The infection rate is accelerating. We're losing control. I know. Fury pulled up a secure channel. Get me Captain Rogers and Doctor Strange. If we're going to do this, we do it our way. Steve Rogers stood at the edge of the quarantine zone and felt sick. He could see the corruption even from here. A wrongness in the air, like heat shimmer, but cold. The buildings in the distance looked normal, but felt wrong. Twisted, like looking at a photograph that had been subtly altered in ways you couldn't quite identify. Strange stood beside him, hands moving in complex patterns, weaving diagnostic spells. It's bad, the sorcerer said. The dimensional barriers here are shredded. I can see through into the warp. There are things on the other side, watching, waiting for the barriers to fail completely. Can you seal it? Maybe. If I had time and resources and a dozen sorcerers as powerful as I am. Strange lowered his hands. We don't have any of those things. Dante's right about one thing. This needs to be contained. Fast. Tony's voice crackled through the comms. I've got drones surveying the zone. Steve, you need to see this. Footage appeared on Steve's HUD. Interior of a warehouse. Dozens of people gathered around something that looked like a sculpture made of flesh and metal and things that might have been alive once. They were chanting. As Steve watched, one of them stepped forward and pressed their hand against the sculpture. Their body convulsed. When they stepped back, their skin was different, smoother, too smooth, and their eyes were black from edge to edge. They're transforming, Strange said quietly, willingly. They think it's beautiful, transcendent. They don't realize they're being consumed. Steve's hands clenched. There has to be a way to save them. Cap. Tony's voice was uncharacteristically soft. I don't think there is. I've been analyzing the possessed. The biological changes are fundamental. Genetic restructuring at the cellular level. Even if we could purge the chaos influence, what's left wouldn't be human anymore. We're not executing civilians. Then what do you suggest? Steve didn't have an answer. He'd fought in World War II. He'd made hard choices, but ordering the death of American citizens on their own soil, that wasn't a line he knew how to cross. A sound made him turn. Dante had arrived, his armor's servos purring. Captain Rogers, have you decided? We're going to evacuate everyone we can. Set up psychic barriers with Strange's help. Contain the spread without mass execution. That will not work. Then we'll make it work. Dante studied him for a long moment. You are a good man, Captain Rogers. I can see why your people follow you. But goodness is not enough against chaos. It will use your mercy as a weapon, your compassion as a gateway. Maybe, but I'm not giving up on those people. Then I will not stop you. Dante gestured, and his space marines moved into position at the quarantine perimeter. We will hold this line. If your plan fails, we will do what must be done. And Captain, when you see what chaos truly is, when you watch it turn people you are trying to save into weapons against you, remember that I offered you mercy, for them and for yourself. The rescue operation began at dawn. SHIELD teams moved into the outer zones of Detroit in armored vehicles, evacuating civilians building by building. Strange and Wong worked with a team of sorcerers, pulled from Kamartaj, every student who could hold a spell, to establish containment wards around the worst areas. It was desperate, improvised, and barely holding. Steve led a team into the mid-zones, where the corruption was spreading but not yet complete. They wore hazmat suits modified with technology scavenged from the Warhammer Earth, psychic dampeners that the Blood Angels had provided. They didn't work perfectly, but they helped. The first building they entered was a school, empty. The walls were covered in drawings that made Steve's eyes hurt. Stick figures with too many limbs. Suns that looked like eyes. Words in a language that shifted when he tried to read them. Classrooms clear, Natasha reported over comms. No survivors, signs of struggle, blood, but no bodies. They went deeper, Strange said. He was back at the command post, monitoring through magical means. Into the heart of the corruption. They're being drawn there, all of them. Steve's team moved through the school, checking room by room. They found evidence of people, shoes, bags, personal items, but no one living, until they reached the gymnasium. 50 people stood in perfect silence, arranged in concentric circles around a symbol painted on the floor, in what looked like blood, but smelled like roses. They didn't move as Steve's team entered. Didn't even seem to see them. "Shield," Steve called out. "We're here to evacuate you. We need you to come with us." No response. The people just stood there, staring at the symbol. Their lips moved in unison, mouthing words without sound. Natasha approached the nearest person, a woman in her 30s, still wearing pajamas. "Mom, can you hear me?" The woman's head turned, slowly, mechanically. Her eyes were starting to darken at the edges. "He's singing," she whispered. "Can't you hear him? He's so beautiful. He wants to show us miracles." "Who's singing?" "The prince, the perfect one. He says we can be beautiful too. He says all we have to do is let go." The woman smiled. Her teeth were too white. "Don't you want to be beautiful?" Steve saw the other people beginning to turn. 50 faces, all smiling the same empty smile. "Nat, fall back." They started backing toward the exit. The people didn't follow. They just watched and smiled and mouthed their silent words. Steve's team made it outside. The building remained quiet behind them. "Strange, we've got 50 unresponsive civilians in there. They're not violent, but they're clearly compromised. What's your read?" Strange's voice came back tight with strain. "They're anchors. The corruption is using them as focal points to maintain the breach. If they stay there, the gateway stays open. We need to move them or what?" Silence. Then, "Or Dante's teams will do it for us." Steve looked back at the school, at the people inside, thought they were experiencing something beautiful, while corruption ate them from within. He thought about what Dante had said, about mercy, about hard choices. "We're bringing them out," Steve said. "Sedate them if we have to, but we're not leaving them." It took an hour to extract all 50 people from the school. They didn't resist, but they didn't help either. They had to be carried one by one, still smiling, still mouthing their prayers to something that promised beauty and delivered damnation. By the time the last one was loaded into a transport, Steve's team was exhausted, and the corruption had spread another 3 blocks. They couldn't save everyone, not fast enough. At the command post, Fury watched the tactical map with growing despair. They'd evacuated 20,000 people, but the contamination zone had grown by 40%. The math wasn't working in their favor. "Sir," Hill's voice was strained. "We just lost contact with Rescue Team 7. Last transmission was..." Screaming. Fury pulled up the feed. Static, then a brief image. Someone's helmet cam, showing a street transformed. The buildings had changed, grown. Organic shapes merged with concrete and steel. And walking through it, things that might have been human once, but weren't anymore. They moved like dancers, graceful, terrible. Their bodies were wrong in ways that Fury's mind refused to process. The camera went dead. "How many teams do we have in the zone?" Fury asked. 12, plus the Avengers. "Pull them out," All of them. We're evacuating. Sir, that's an order. We lost. Dante was right. We can't save these people. Hill relayed the orders. Across the Detroit zone, SHIELD teams began falling back. Some made it out. Some didn't. The screams came through the radio for 20 minutes before those channels went silent. Steve's team was among the last to evacuate. They'd saved maybe 200 people. Behind them, the corruption swallowed streets and buildings and anyone who couldn't run fast enough. As Steve climbed into the transport, he looked back at the city, at the nightmare it was becoming, and he felt something he hadn't felt since waking up in the 21st century. Helplessness. Dante was waiting at the new perimeter. His expression held no judgment, no triumph, just weary acceptance. "I'm sorry, Captain Rogers," the Blood Angel said quietly. "I wish your way had worked." Steve didn't answer. Couldn't. He just watched as the Thunderhawks moved into position over Detroit. "Final warning broadcast," Dante ordered. "Anyone still in the zone has 5 minutes to evacuate. After that," the Space Marines began the purge at exactly 5 minutes. Incendiary weapons, plasma fire, virus bombs that would burn at temperatures hot enough to crack stone. They didn't target people. They targeted the infection, the buildings, the ground itself. Steve watched it burn, watched a city die to kill the thing growing inside it. The flames were visible from 30 miles away. It took 6 hours for the fires to burn out. When they did, Detroit was gone. Just a smoking crater and ash, but the corruption was contained. Dante found Steve in the aftermath, standing at the edge of the blast zone. 300,000 people lived there, Steve said quietly. "We evacuated 230,000, Dante replied. "The rest were already lost. We don't know that. Captain, I have fought this war for longer than your country has existed. I know the signs. I know when someone is too far gone." Dante's voice was heavy. "And I know what it costs to make these choices. I have made them 1,000 times. It never gets easier. But it is necessary. Does it have to be?" "Yes." Dante looked at the ruins. "Because the alternative is watching your entire species fall. And I have seen that too. I will not allow it again. Not here." They stood in silence as the wind carried ash across the dead ground. Behind them, refugee camps were being established. Medical tents, food distribution. SHIELD trying to process 250,000 displaced people. And above them, in orbit, more ships were arriving. Not all of them human. The war was spreading. The loss of Detroit changed everything. In the week that followed, the world's governments realized they were facing something unprecedented. Not an invasion they could fight with armies. Not a natural disaster they could manage with resources. This was a metaphysical threat, an infection of reality itself. Emergency sessions were called in every major government. The United Nations held a special assembly. The World Security Council authorized SHIELD to coordinate a global response. And for the first time in history, the world's nations agreed on something. They needed help from the other Earth. The Imperium's response was swift and absolute. Within days, additional Space Marine strike forces arrived from various locations where they'd been stationed on the Warhammer Earth. Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Ultramarines, Storm Wardens, not full chapters. The merged Earth didn't have enough strategic value to warrant that kind of deployment, but enough squads to establish a presence in major cities. They came with supplies, equipment, knowledge, and very specific demands. Fury sat across from Captain Dante in a SHIELD conference room that now had purity seals on the walls. The Blood Angel had been clear. If they were going to protect this world, they needed certain concessions. "You're asking us to let you establish military bases on sovereign soil," Fury said. We are asking to establish fortress monasteries in areas of high corruption risk, Dante corrected. Your major cities, places where the veil is thin. We will defend them, train your people, share our knowledge of chaos and how to resist it, in exchange for compliance with imperial doctrine. Your people must be educated about the warp, about chaos, about the proper wards and rituals to protect themselves. This will require changes to your society. What kind of changes? Dante pulled up a data slate. The list was long. Restrictions on certain types of thought, mandatory education about the dangers of the warp, registration of anyone with psychic abilities, protocols for identifying and quarantining corruption, and at the bottom, something that made Fury's blood run cold. Authorization for Astartes forces to conduct exterminatus, complete purge, of any zone deemed irredeemably corrupted. This is martial law, Fury said flatly. This is survival, Dante replied. Director Fury, I understand this is difficult. Your world has never faced this threat. You value freedom, individuality, the right to think and feel without restriction. But those very freedoms are vulnerabilities against chaos. The dark gods feed on unrestrained emotion, on doubt, on desire. If your people are not disciplined, they will fall. And if we refuse, Dante's expression didn't go unchanged. Then we will protect those who accept our help and let the rest face the consequences of their choice. I do not make this offer lightly, Director. The Imperium has no interest in conquering your world. We have 1 million planets already, but we will not watch another civilization fall to chaos if we can prevent it. Fury stood, walked to the window. Outside, he could see one of the new fortress monasteries under construction, already 3 stories tall, all Gothic arches and reinforced walls. The workers looked tiny next to the Space Marines overseeing the project. I need to talk to the Council, Fury said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Understood. But Director? Do not take too long. The corruption does not wait for bureaucracy. The Avengers met in secret to discuss the situation. They gathered in a safe house that predated the merge, one of Nick Fury's backup facilities. No recording devices, no surveillance, just the team and hard questions. They're talking about fundamentally changing our society, Tony said. He had holographic displays showing the Imperial proposals. Mandatory religious education, psychic registration, thought control. This is everything we fought against. It's also keeping us alive, Bruce countered. He'd been studying the Warhammer Earth's data on chaos corruption. I've reviewed the case files. The Imperium has been fighting this for 10,000 years and they've barely survived. Without their methods, entire sectors of space fell. Worlds with billions of people, all corrupted or destroyed. So we trade freedom for security, Steve asked. Where have we heard that before? This isn't the same, Stranger said quietly. He looked exhausted. He'd been working non-stop to establish ward networks around major cities, using techniques taught by Imperial-sanctioned psychers. Steve, I've seen what's on the other side of the barriers. The entities in the warp are real, they're powerful, and they're absolutely hostile to everything we call human. The Imperium's methods are brutal, yes, but they work. At what cost? Natasha asked. At the cost of being alive, Thor said. He'd been quiet throughout the meeting, arms crossed, face troubled. I have spoken with some of the Imperium's warriors. I've heard their histories. They are not conquerors by choice, but by necessity. Every moment of peace they achieve is paid for in blood. It is a grim existence. So what do we do? Clint asked. Roll over and accept their occupation. It's not occupation, Bruce said. They're not taking resources. They're not installing puppet governments. They're defending against a threat we can't handle alone. Yet, Tony added, we can't handle it yet. Give me time, give me resources, and I can develop technology to counter this chaos stuff without sacrificing our freedom. Strange shook his head. Tony, I've tried. I've analyzed the warp from every angle. It's not something technology can simply counter. It's fundamental. It's emotion made manifest. As long as humans feel fear, rage, despair, ambition, the warp will exist, and the entities within it will try to break through. So what, we just give up? Accept that we need to become like them? Paranoid, authoritarian, living in fear of our own thoughts. We accept that the universe is larger and more dangerous than we knew, Steve said slowly. He'd been thinking about this for days. And we adapt, but on our terms. We learn from the Imperium. We accept their help, but we don't become them. We find a middle way. Is there a middle way? Bruce asked. When the threat is existential, when hesitation means death, can we afford to compromise? The room fell silent. It was Tony who finally spoke, and his voice was uncharacteristically serious. Remember the Sokovia Accords, how that split us apart. We're facing the same kind of choice now. Security versus freedom, control versus chaos. And we all know how that ended. This is different, Natasha said. The Accords were about human accountability. This is about survival against something that wants to eat our souls. Is it different? Tony challenged. Or are we just more scared this time? Steve looked around at his team, his friends. They were divided, uncertain, and he realized that was natural, healthy. The fact that they were even having this debate meant they weren't falling into the trap of easy answers. We compromise, Steve decided. We accept the Imperium's help in the short term. We learn their methods. We establish defenses. But we don't give up on finding our own way. And we make it clear, this is temporary. We're partners, not subjects. Think they'll accept that? Clint asked. I don't know, but it's the only offer I'm willing to make. Captain Dante received the proposal while overseeing the construction of a fortress monastery outside New York. He read it carefully, then read it again, then looked at the SHIELD liaison officer who delivered it. This is insufficient, Dante said. It's what we're offering, the officer replied. She was young, brave, trembling but standing her ground. Dante respected that. Your people wish to maintain democratic processes, individual freedoms, minimum chaos protocols. This will not be enough. It's non-negotiable. Dante was quiet for a long moment. He thought about 1100 years of war, about worlds he'd seen fall because populations refused to accept the hard truths about chaos, about entire civilizations corrupted because they valued individual liberty over collective survival. But he also thought about the uncorrupted souls he'd seen on this earth. Bright, hopeful, unlike anything he'd encountered in the Imperium for centuries. There was something here worth preserving beyond mere survival. Very well, he said finally. We will accept your terms, for now. But understand, if the corruption spreads beyond containment, if your methods prove insufficient, we will do what is necessary, with or without your approval. Is that a threat? It is a promise and a warning. We have sacrificed too much, for too long, to watch another world fall. Dante's expression softened slightly. But I hope it will not come to that. Perhaps your optimism is not entirely misplaced. Perhaps there is another way. I have not believed that in many centuries. But perhaps. The officer saluted and left. Dante returned to his work, but his mind was troubled. He'd seen this pattern before. Worlds that thought they could fight chaos on their own terms. None had succeeded. But something about this earth was different. The people here had heroes, not just warriors, but symbols, people who inspired hope rather than fear. The Imperium had forgotten how to do that somewhere in its long history. Maybe, just maybe, that would make the difference. The compromise held for 3 weeks. In that time, progress was made. Fortress monasteries were established in major cities. Shield agents received basic training in recognizing chaos corruption. Dr. Strange worked with Imperial-sanctioned psychers to establish a ward network around population centers. The possessed civilians evacuated from Detroit were kept in specialized containment, neither executed nor released, but quarantined while Strange and his colleagues searched for a cure. Tony Stark threw himself into understanding Warhammer technology. The Mechanicus representatives from the Imperium were initially reluctant to share knowledge. Their tech priest treated machines as religious artifacts, complete with prayer rituals before use. But Tony's enthusiasm was infectious. Slowly, carefully, bridges were built. Thor spent time with Chaplain Moria discussing the nature of faith and its power. The conversations were surprisingly productive. Both understood that belief could shape reality. They simply disagreed on what should be believed. Steve Rogers trained with Blood Angel veterans, learning techniques for fighting in close quarters against enemies that could corrupt through touch. The Space Marines respected his skill, even if they found his hope naive. Natasha and Clint worked with Imperial Guard units who'd merged with the Earth, learning their tactics and teaching SHIELD protocols in return. The Guard soldiers were grateful for the exchange. Most of them had never met baseline humans who could hold their own in a fight. Bruce Banner studied the warp from a scientific perspective, much to the horror of the tech priests. His gamma radiation made him resistant to chaos corruption. The Hulk, it turned out, was too angry and too simple for demon possession to work properly. It gave him unique opportunities for research. For 3 weeks, it looked like the compromise might work. Then Beijing fell. The city had a population of 20 million. The merge had placed it adjacent to an ancient battlefield from the Warhammer Earth, a place where a massive chaos incursion had been defeated 10,000 years ago. The ground was still corrupted, still toxic, still whispering. No one noticed the first signs, small things, dreams, whispers, people acting slightly wrong. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the corruption had spread through 6 districts. This time it wasn't Slaanesh. It was Nurgle, the plague god. The corruption manifested as disease, but not any disease that modern medicine recognized. People's bodies didn't decay. They transformed. Bones grew into new shapes. Skin became tougher. Internal organs restructured themselves into something that could survive anything. Radiation, vacuum, fire. The transformed became plague bearers, walking vectors of supernatural disease, and they spread fast. China's military responded with force. Artillery, airstrikes, chemical weapons. Nothing worked. The plague bearers shambled through fire and toxic gas without slowing. They were already dead in every way that mattered. Their bodies were just hosts for Nurgle's gifts. By the time the Space Marines arrived, 15 million people were infected. Captain Dante stood in a command center 300 miles from Beijing and studied the tactical displays with a sinking feeling. "It's too late," he said quietly. "The city is lost. We have to try," General Zhao of the Chinese military insisted. "There are millions of people. There are millions of disease vectors," Dante corrected. "If we do not contain this now, the entire continent falls within a month. We will not abandon our people. Then you will die with them and doom everyone else." Dante turned to face the general. "I am sorry, truly, but I have seen this before. Nurgle's corruption cannot be cured. only burned out. We must establish a cordon around Beijing and purge everything within it. That's 15 million people. That's 15 million plague carriers who will spread Nurgle's rot to everyone they touch. General, I understand your pain, but you must make the choice your civilian leadership refuses to make. General Zhao looked at the screens, at satellite footage showing Beijing transforming, buildings growing organic structures, streets filled with shambling figures that had once been human. He thought about his own family in that city, his grandchildren. Do it, he whispered. Emperor, forgive me. Do it. The exterminatus took 2 hours. Orbital strikes from Imperium warships still in low orbit. Virus bombs, incendiary weapons. Finally, plasma bombardment to crack the ground and make sure nothing survived. When it was over, Beijing was a crater of molten glass. The world watched in horror. Protests erupted in every major city. People demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded to know why 15 million people had been killed without even attempting evacuation. Fury held a press conference and tried to explain about chaos, about the corruption that couldn't be cured, about the choice between 15 million now or hundreds of millions later. The reporters didn't want explanations. They wanted someone to blame. The fragile alliance between Marvel Earth and the Imperium began to crack. The protests turned into riots within 48 hours. People were scared, angry. They'd watched 15 million people die in fire from orbit and been told it was necessary, that it was mercy, that there had been no other choice. The reasoning didn't matter. The images did. Bodies burning, a city reduced to glass, and the cold efficiency with which it had been done. In New York, crowds gathered outside the half-built fortress monastery. They threw rocks at the Gothic walls, burned effigies of space marines, chanted slogans about freedom and fascism and foreign occupation. SHIELD tried to maintain order, but the anger was too widespread, too raw. Steve Rogers walked through the crowd in civilian clothes, listening. He heard fear beneath the anger. People didn't understand what they were fighting. They only knew that their world had changed overnight, and suddenly armored giants were making life and death decisions about entire cities. He found a woman sitting on a curb crying. Her sign lay discarded beside her. Beijing was murder. I had family there, she said when Steve sat beside her. My sister, her kids, they were just normal people. And now they're ash because someone decided they weren't worth saving. Steve didn't have an answer for her. Couldn't tell her it was necessary. Couldn't tell her it was wrong. Both felt true, and that was the problem. I'm sorry, he said quietly. She looked at him, recognized him through the tears. You're Captain America. You're supposed to protect us, but you're working with them, the ones who burned Beijing. I'm trying to find a way to protect everyone. You're failing. She picked up her sign and walked away. Steve sat there for a long time, watching the protests, feeling the weight of choices that had no good answers. Tony Stark made a decision that night that would change everything. He'd been working in secret for weeks, studying warp physics and chaos corruption from every angle. The Imperium's methods worked, yes, but they were reactive, defensive. They treated chaos as an inevitability to be managed rather than a problem to be solved. Tony didn't accept that. He never had. Every problem had a solution if you were smart enough to find it. The issue was the dimensional barriers. The warp was bleeding through into real space because the merge had shredded those barriers. So the solution was obvious: repair the barriers. Not with prayers and faith shields, but with technology, hard science, engineering. He'd been running simulations for days. The math was brutal. The energy requirements were astronomical, but it was possible, theoretically. He could build a device that would stabilize the dimensional barriers around Earth, seal the warp breaches, make the planet immune to chaos corruption. The catch was the power source. He needed something that could generate massive amounts of energy in a focused burst. Something like the arc reactor in his chest, but 1,000 times more powerful. Or he could use something that already existed, an Imperium plasma reactor from one of their orbital defense platforms. The problem was, the Imperium would never agree to it. They didn't trust baseline human technology. They'd say it was heretical to try to solve the warp problem with science instead of faith. They'd call him arrogant, dangerous. They'd shut him down. So Tony decided not to ask permission. He recruited Bruce Banner. The physicist was the only person who understood the theoretical framework well enough to help. They worked in a secure facility beneath Stark Tower, building the device in secret, a dimensional stabilizer. Tony called it the harmonic barrier generator. "Are you sure about this?" Bruce asked on the third night, watching Tony wire together components that shouldn't work together but did anyway. "If the Imperium finds out," "They won't. We test it small scale first, prove the concept, then we scale up before they can stop us. Tony, these people have survived 10,000 years of war against chaos. Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they're stuck in their ways. Maybe they've been fighting so long, they've forgotten that some problems can actually be solved." Tony connected another circuit. "I'm not saying their methods are wrong. I'm saying there might be a better way, and I'm going to find it." Bruce wanted to argue, but he also wanted Tony to be right, wanted there to be a solution that didn't involve burning cities and sacrificing millions. So he helped. They completed the prototype in 5 days, a device the size of a car, bristling with salvaged tech from both Earths. It looked like it had been assembled by a madman, which, technically, it had been. The test site was in Nevada, remote, isolated, far from population centers. They'd identified a minor warp breach there, a weak point where the barriers were thin, but not yet critical. Perfect for testing. Strange found out about the test 2 hours before it happened. He appeared in Tony's workshop through a portal, face dark with anger. "Tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing." Tony didn't look up from his final calibrations. "Depends what you think I'm doing." "Attempting to seal a warp breach with untested technology based on theories you've known for less than a month. When you say it like that, it sounds reckless." "Because it is." Strange grabbed Tony's shoulder, forced him to turn. "Tony, the warp isn't just another dimension. It's alive, conscious. The entities within it are intelligent, and they react to threats. If you succeed, if you actually manage to seal the breach, you'll get their attention. All of them. And they will respond. Let them. I'll build more devices. Seal every breach on the planet. You're assuming they'll give you time. The dark gods don't play by rules, you understand. They exist outside linear time. They could strike at any point in your timeline. Past, present, future. They could corrupt you before you finish. They could turn your device into a gateway instead of a seal. So what? We do nothing? We just accept that Earth is permanently vulnerable?" Strange was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm saying, be careful. Test it properly. Work with the Imperium. Don't rush. The Imperium will say no, because they've learned the cost of arrogance against chaos. You haven't." Tony met his gaze. "Stephen, I'm doing this, with or without your blessing, but I'd rather have your help." Strange looked at the device. At the readings showing the warp breach it was designed to seal. At Tony's determined expression. Finally, he sighed. "I'll monitor the test. If anything goes wrong, anything at all, I shut it down immediately." "Agreed." "Agreed." They transported the device to Nevada at dawn. Bruce managed the setup. Tony handled final calibrations. Strange established a perimeter of protective wards, just in case. The warp breach was visible even without instruments. A shimmer in the air, like heat distortion, but cold. Strange could see through it into the warp beyond. Shifting colors, impossible geometries, things that might have been watching. Breach is stable, Bruce reported. No sign of expansion. Powering up the device, Tony said. The machine hummed to life. Energy readings spiked. The air around it began to shimmer differently. Not the cold wrongness of the warp, but something cleaner, ordered. Initiating harmonic frequency generation in 3, 2, 1, now. The device screamed. Not literally, but it felt like screaming. A sound that bypassed ears and hit directly in the chest. The warp breach reacted immediately. It convulsed, shrank. The shimmer intensified, then began to fade. It's working, Bruce breathed. The dimensional barriers are strengthening. The breach is sealing. Tony watched the readings with fierce satisfaction. I told you, science beats superstition every... The device exploded. Not physically, worse. It imploded into itself, creating a sudden vacuum that dragged air and light and heat into a single point. Then it reversed, exploded outward with a burst of energy that sent all 3 men flying. When Tony's vision cleared, he saw the warp breach. It hadn't sealed. It had grown, doubled in size. And through it, something was looking back. Something vast, something that noticed them. Strange was on his feet instantly, hands moving through defensive patterns. Close it. Shut the device down. I'm trying. Tony's suit systems were scrambled. The device was feeding back power, drawing energy from sources he couldn't identify. The breach continued to expand. 20 feet wide, 30, 50. And through it, things began to push. They came through in pieces first. Claws, tendrils, body parts that belonged to no creature evolution had ever designed. Then whole entities began manifesting. Demons, lesser ones, but still terrifying. Things made of malice and hunger, given semi-physical form. Bruce transformed without conscious thought. The Hulk erupted from his clothes, roaring defiance. He grabbed the nearest demon and crushed it. The entity didn't die, couldn't die, not truly. But its physical manifestation shattered, and it was sucked back into the warp. Strange was chanting, pulling mystical energies from dimensions that had nothing to do with the warp. His wards held back the tide, barely, but more demons were coming through. The breach was still growing. Tony managed to override the device's systems and triggered an emergency shutdown. The machine went dark. Instantly, the breach stopped expanding, but it didn't close. It hung there, 60 feet wide, spewing demons into the Nevada desert. We need help, Strange said through gritted teeth. Now. Tony hit his distress beacon. The signal went out to every Avenger, every shield agent, every allied force within range, including the Blood Angels Fortress Monastery in New York. Captain Dante received the alert within seconds. He assessed the situation. Warp breach, expanding, demon incursion, and made his decision in less time than it took a human heart to beat. All available squads, immediate deployment. Thunderhawks to launch in 60 seconds. This is a priority alpha threat. He turned to his command staff. Contact Captain Rogers. Tell him his people have made a terrible mistake. And tell him we are coming to fix it. The battle for Nevada lasted 3 hours. The demons were endless. Lesser entities, thankfully. No greater demons managed to squeeze through before the Space Marines arrived. But numerous. They swarmed across the desert, corrupting everything they touched. Plants withered. Sand turned to glass, then to something organic and pulsing. The Hulk fought with mindless fury, smashing demons into fragments. Each kill only held them back temporarily. Demons couldn't truly die in real space, but it bought time. Strange channeled power until blood ran from his eyes, maintaining wards that kept the breach from expanding further. Wong arrived with reinforcements from Kamartaj. Together, they began the slow work of sealing the breach properly, with ritual, with faith, with methods that had worked for 10,000 years. The Thunderhawks arrived like avenging angels. Space Marines deployed in drop pods that hit the ground with enough force to crater Earth. They formed a battle line between the breach and the surrounding area, weapons firing in controlled bursts. Bolt-arounds tore through demonic flesh. Flamers burned corruption from the sand. Dante found Tony in the center of the chaos, his armor scorched, fighting off a demon that looked like it was made of knives and hunger. The Space Marine's bolt pistol barked once, and the creature exploded in a spray of ichor. Stark. Dante's voice carried no anger, just disappointment. What have you done? Tony looked at the breach, at the destruction spreading outward, at his device smoking and dead. I tried to help. You tried to solve a problem you do not understand with tools you have not mastered. This is why we counsel caution, why we demand faith over innovation, because the warp punishes arrogance. I had to try something. Your way is just endless war and survival, never actually fixing the problem. Because the problem cannot be fixed, only managed. Dante gestured at the breach. You have made it worse, drawn the attention of forces that will not forget. They know of this world now. They know it is vulnerable, and they will come. Strange finished his sealing ritual. The breach shrank, collapsed, sealed itself with a sound like reality scabbing over a wound. The remaining demons flickered and faded, pulled back into the warp now that their gateway was closed. Silence fell across the desert. The battle was over, but the damage was done. Dante turned to Tony. Come with me. We need to speak with your leaders about consequences and about how much longer we can afford your Earth's independence. The Emergency Council met in a secure shield facility. Everyone was there. The Avengers, Nick Fury, representatives from world governments, and Captain Dante with a full honor guard of blood angels. The footage from Nevada played on screens around the room. The device, the breach, the demons, the destruction, the near disaster that had only been contained because the Space Marines responded fast enough. This is what comes of refusing Imperial wisdom, Dante said when the footage ended. You value innovation over caution, individual brilliance over collective discipline, and it nearly cost you BGU everything. We were trying to find a better solution, Steve said. There is no better solution. Only the solutions that work and the ones that kill you. Dante's voice was firm but not unkind. Captain Rogers, I respect your desire to maintain your world's independence, but you must understand. You are children playing with weapons you cannot comprehend. The warp is not a problem to be solved with engineering. It is a fundamental aspect of reality. As long as sentient beings feel emotion, the warp exists. As long as the warp exists, chaos exists. This is truth, immutable. So we just give up? Tony asked bitterly. Accept that we're permanently vulnerable? You accept reality, and you learn to survive within it, as we have for 10 millennia. Fury spoke up. Captain Dante, what are you proposing? Full integration with Imperial protocols, mandatory chaos education, psychic screening, thought discipline training, and immediate construction of defensive infrastructure at every major population center. No more compromises, no more experiments. You follow our methods, or you face the consequences alone. The room erupted. Delegates shouting, arguments overlapping, accusations of imperialism and dictatorship and occupation. Steve waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke quietly, but everyone heard. No. Dante turned to him. Captain, no. We won't become your subjects. We made a mistake, a bad one. But we learn from mistakes. We adapt. We get better. That's what humans do. Your humans forgot that somewhere in 10,000 years of war. But we haven't. And we won't. Then you will fall. Maybe. But we'll fall free. The standoff stretched. Two visions of humanity. One forged in endless war, disciplined and hard and unbreakable but cold. The other younger, messier, more hopeful but vulnerable. It was an unexpected voice that broke the silence. General Zhao of the Chinese military, who'd authorized the Beijing purge, stood slowly. I watched 15 million of my people burn, he said quietly. I gave the order. I live with that choice every day, and I would make it again, because the alternative was worse. But I will not make that choice for the entire world. We must find our own way, even if it costs us, especially if it costs us, because a humanity that survives by becoming something inhuman is not humanity at all. Other voices joined his. Delegates from nations that had lost cities, lost people, lost everything in the weeks since the merge. They'd seen the horror, they understood the threat, but they wouldn't surrender what made them human to survive. Dante listened. When they finished, he removed his helmet. His face was ancient, tired, but there was something in his eyes that might have been respect. Very well, he said. We will maintain our alliance on your terms, for now. But understand, the next time you face a threat you cannot handle, do not expect us to save you. You have chosen independence. That means accepting the consequences of your choices. All of them. He replaced his helmet and left, his honor guard following. The room remained silent for a long time after he was gone. 6 weeks after the Nevada incident, the real invasion began. It started in orbit, ships translating from the warp into real space. Not demon vessels, not chaos corruption. Something worse. Tyranids. The Hive fleet had been traveling toward the Warhammer Earth for months before the merge. Now it arrived to find its target changed, doubled. 2 Earths in one space, twice the biomass, twice the genetic material to consume and repurpose. The fleet didn't hesitate, didn't communicate, didn't demand surrender. It simply began its approach, a swarm of organic ships that numbered in the thousands, each one grown rather than built, each one part of a vast distributed intelligence that saw all of humanity, both versions, as nothing more than food. The first warning came from Imperium orbital sensors. Captain Dante was in the New York Fortress Monastery when the alert screamed across every channel. He looked at the tactical displays and felt something he rarely experienced. Fear, not for himself, for everyone on the planet below. All channels, he ordered. Broadcast on every frequency. This is a Priority 0 alert. Tyranid Hive fleet approaching. All forces, all factions. Prepare for planetary defense. This is not a drill. SHIELD picked up the broadcast. Nick Fury was in the command center within minutes, pulling up satellite feeds. What he saw made his blood run cold. The sky was filling with organic shapes, living ships that ranged from the size of cars to the size of aircraft carriers, and they were descending. Get me, everyone, Fury said. Avengers, military, every hero, every powered individual, every person who can hold a weapon. We're about to fight for the survival of the species. Tony Stark was in his workshop when the alert came through. He looked at the feed showing the Hive fleet and ran calculations. The numbers were bad, really bad. The fleet massed more than anything Earth had ever faced. More than the Chitauri, more than Ultron, more than Thanos' forces. Jarvis, Analysis. Sir, based on available data, our probability of successful defense is less than 3%. So you're saying there's a chance? Sir, I must point out that 3% rounds down to 0 in most statistical models. Good thing I've never been good at statistics. Tony began powering up every suit he had, every weapon system, every contingency plan. Jarvis prepped the Hulkbuster, the Godkiller armor, and every other toy we've got. We're going to need them. Steve Rogers received the alert while training with a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. recruits. He stopped mid-exercise, read the tactical brief, and felt his stomach drop. Tyranids. The files from the Imperium described them as the Great Devourer, an extragalactic threat that had consumed entire sectors of space. They adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and never, ever stopped. He dismissed the recruits and headed for the command center. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together. Thor was off-world when the alert reached him. He returned through the Bifrost with a contingent of Asgardian warriors. They landed in New York to find the city already preparing for war. "Captain Rogers," Thor called out, his voice carrying over the chaos of mobilization. "I have brought warriors. Where are we needed most?" "Everywhere," Steve replied grimly. "This isn't one landing site. It's simultaneous planetary assault. They're hitting every major city at once." Dr. Strange appeared through a portal. Wong beside him. "The sanctums are reinforced. We've established S.H.I.E.L.D. networks over population centers. But Stephen," Wong hesitated, "this enemy doesn't use magic. It's pure biology. Our defenses won't be as effective." "Then we adapt," Strange said. "We always adapt." Across the globe, similar scenes played out. Heroes and soldiers and ordinary people preparing for an enemy they didn't understand. The Imperium forces mobilized with practiced efficiency. Space Marines took up defensive positions. Imperial Guard units, those who'd merged with Marvel Earth, dug in and prepared to hold against impossible odds. They'd done it before. They'd do it again, or they'd die trying. Captain Dante stood on the walls of his fortress monastery and watched the sky darken with descending Tyranid organisms, mycetic spores, each one carrying dozens of bioforms. They'd hit like meteors, crack open, and spew horrors onto the surface. He'd seen it 100 times on 100 worlds. This time felt different. This time, he was defending a world that had chosen hope over discipline, freedom over security. It was foolish, naive. But watching the Marvel Earth's forces mobilize, powered individuals flying to defensive positions, soldiers checking weapons, civilians evacuating in orderly lines, he saw something the Imperium had lost. They weren't just surviving, they still believed they could win. "All blood angels," Dante said into the Vox network. "The Great Devourer comes. We stand between them and a world that has shown us what humanity can be when it hasn't been ground down by endless war. We defend not just lives, but hope itself, for Sanguinius, for the Emperor, for the idea that humanity can be something more than just surviving." The first mycetic spores hit. The battle for Earth lasted 3 days and 3 nights. The Tyranids came in waves. First, the small bioforms, Hormagaunts and Termagants, quick and vicious, meant to overwhelm through numbers. They crashed against defensive lines in the thousands. The Space Marines held, their bolters cutting down bioforms in controlled bursts. But there were always more. Iron Man flew through swarms of gargoyles, winged Tyranid organisms that attacked en masse. His repulsors burned through their wings, sent them tumbling. But they adapted. The second wave had a thicker hide. The third wave could shrug off repulsor blasts. Tony had to cycle through weapons constantly, never using the same one twice in a row. "They're learning," he reported over comms. "Every time I use a weapon, they develop resistance. We need to stay unpredictable. Acknowledged, Steve replied. He was on the ground in Times Square, which had become a defensive stronghold. Tyranid warriors, larger bioforms with heavy weapons, were pushing toward his position. He threw his shield, took down one, caught the shield on the return. A warrior fired a bioplasma blast. Steve dodged, but the blast hit a building behind him. The structure melted. Thor landed beside him with a thunderclap, Mjolnir crackling with lightning. Captain, the larger organisms approached from the east, things with 4 legs and cannons growing from their backs. Carnifexes, Strange said through the comms network. He'd linked everyone together with a spell. The first time Marvel Earth's heroes had worked on a unified battlefield network. Imperial files say they're living tanks, heavy armor, extreme aggression. Don't let them reach population centers. We need air support, Steve said. He could see the Carnifexes now, massive shapes lumbering through the destroyed streets, firing bioweapons that could punch through buildings. On it. The voice was female, confident. Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, streaked across the sky, energy blazing around her. She hit the lead Carnifex like a meteor. The impact cratered the street. The Carnifex staggered but didn't fall. It swung a massive claw that would have bisected a normal person. Carol caught the claw, tore it off, and beat the creature to death with its own limb. 3 more Carnifexes adjusted their aim toward her. "Yeah, come on," Carol shouted. "Let's see how you handle energy absorption." She drew their fire, tanked hits that would have leveled buildings, and returned fire with photon blasts that burned through Tyranid chitin. In Brooklyn, the Hulk was fighting something even bigger. A Trigon, a massive serpentine bioform with bioelectric weapons. It coiled around buildings, firing lightning at anything that moved. The Hulk grabbed its tail, planted his feet, and pulled. The Trigon thrashed. Buildings crumbled. The Hulk didn't let go. He pulled harder, muscles straining, roaring defiance. The Trigon's tail separated from its body in a spray of ichor. The Hulk threw the severed section at the creature's head. The Trigon adapted, grew a new tail, and attacked again. "These things don't stay dead," Bruce's voice, somehow rational even while the Hulk fought. "Every time I kill something, it regenerates or another one replaces it." "That's what they do," Dante replied. He was in the thickest fighting, his ancient power sword cutting through Tyranid bioforms. His honor guard fought beside him, a wall of crimson armor holding against a tide of claws and teeth. "They are infinite. We are not. We must target the synapse creatures, the ones coordinating the swarm. Kill them, and the lesser bioforms become mindless." "How do we identify them?" Natasha asked. She was coordinating ground forces, directing SHIELD agents and military units to weak points in the Tyranid advance. "They're larger, more heavily armored. They emit psychic control signals. Dr. Strange should be able to detect them." Strange was already working on it. He cast his awareness across the battlefield, looking for psychic signatures. There, 3 Tyranid warriors, with enhanced neural connections. Synapse creatures, coordinating sections of the swarm. "I've got targets. Sending coordinates now." The heroes shifted focus. Sniper teams targeted the synapse creatures. Orbital strikes from the remaining Imperium ships concentrated fire. Strange opened portals directly above the creatures and dropped ordnance through from high altitude. The first synapse creature died to a hammer throw from Thor. The second to a combined assault from Iron Man and War Machine. The third fell when Captain America threw his shield through its skull at exactly the right angle. Immediately, the Tyranid swarm in their sectors lost cohesion. The bioform started attacking each other, confused, without direction. It gave the defenders breathing room. But it wasn't enough. On the second day, the Hive fleet deployed its truly massive bioforms. The Hierophant appeared over Manhattan, a bio-titan, 40 meters tall, 6 legs, weapon systems grown into its carapace that could level city blocks. It walked through buildings like they were paper, heading straight for the population shelters. "We can't let that thing reach the civilians," Steve said. He was exhausted. 2 days of fighting, no sleep, just adrenaline and will. All assets converge on the Bio-Titan. The combined response was immediate but inadequate. Iron Man's best weapons barely scratched its hide. Thor's lightning made it stumble but didn't slow it. The Hulk jumped onto its back and started tearing at its armor. The Hierophant barely seemed to notice. Then the earth shook. From the Imperium staging area came something that dwarfed even the Hierophant. A Warlord Titan, an actual god machine of the Mechanicus, somehow merged with Earth during the initial event and only now awakened. 90 feet of metal and faith and firepower. It strode forward on legs that crushed cars under massive feet. Its void shields shimmered to life, its weapons armed, a horn blasted, not a sound, a psychic announcement of war. The Warlord Titan spoke, its voice the voice of its princeps amplified through machine spirit. For the Omnisia, for Mars, for humanity. The Hierophant turned to face this new threat. For a moment, 2 titans stood facing each other, one of flesh, one of metal. Then they charged. The collision was apocalyptic. The Warlord's power fist connected with the Hierophant's head. The Bio-Titan's claws raked across void shields, sparking and tearing. Weapons fired at point-blank range. Bioplasma against volcano cannon. The Warlord's melter weapon burned through chitin. The Hierophant's acid spray ate into armor. They fought for 10 minutes that felt like hours. Buildings collapsed in their wake. The ground cracked under their weight. Heroes and soldiers on both sides could only watch, awed and terrified by the scale of destruction. Finally, the Warlord Titan's volcano cannon charged to full power. Point blank shot into the Hierophant's core. The Bio-Titan exploded from within, ichor spraying in a fountain that rained down across 6 blocks. The Warlord Titan stood in the ruins, damaged but victorious. Its horn blasted again. Across the battlefield, defenders cheered. But the cheering died quickly, because the Hive fleet was adapting. The next wave of bioform showed resistance to energy weapons. The wave after that showed coordinated pack tactics that countered the defenders' strategies. "They're learning from us," Strange reported. "Every tactic we use, they counter. Every weapon we deploy, they adapt to. We're in an evolutionary arms race and they're faster than we are. Then we need something they can't adapt to," Tony said. "Something so overwhelming they don't have time to adjust." "What do you have in mind?" Steve asked. "Remember that device I built? The one that went wrong in Nevada? The one that opened a warp breach and nearly killed us? That's the one. What if we opened a breach deliberately, right in the middle of their fleet? Silence on the channel. Then Dante's voice. You would weaponize the warp against the Tyranids. Why not? They're biological, psychic. The warp would corrupt them or destroy them or both. It would also corrupt everything else nearby, including you. Not if we control the breach. Open it, hold it just long enough to damage the fleet, then seal it. Surgical strike." Strange spoke up. "Tony, that's insane. The entities in the warp don't follow our commands. Open a breach and you're inviting demons to flood through. So we fight demons instead of Tyranids. At least demons can be banished. These bugs just keep coming." Dante was quiet for a moment. Then, "It could work. The Tyranids have limited psychic resistance. The hive mind coordinates them, but individual bioforms are vulnerable. A warp breach would disrupt their synapse network, possibly even damage the hive mind itself. You're actually considering this? Strange asked. I'm considering survival. And Stark is correct. We are losing. The swarm continues to grow. We have killed millions of bioforms and billions more remain. We need a decisive strike. Steve made the decision. Do it. But Strange, you control the breach. Open it, damage their fleet, close it immediately. No hesitation. This is a terrible idea, Strange said. You have a better one? No. Then we go with the terrible idea. It's kind of our thing. They set up the new device on top of Stark Tower. Tony had rebuilt it, incorporating everything he'd learned from the Nevada failure. It was larger, more stable, and wired directly into Strange's mystic wards so the sorcerer could control its output. The plan was simple. Open a warp breach in low orbit, directly in the path of the descending Hive fleet. The demons that came through would attack the nearest psychic presence, which would be the Hive mind's influence. With luck, the two forces would tear each other apart. With luck, Tony muttered, making final adjustments. I'm betting the survival of humanity on luck. We've done worse, Steve said. He stood at the edge of the tower, looking at the battle raging below. 3 days of fighting. The city was in ruins, but the people were still alive, still fighting. How long until you're ready? 5 minutes. Make it 3. Tony worked faster. Strange prepared his sealing ritual, memorizing every gesture, every word. He couldn't afford mistakes. One error and the breach would spiral out of control. Dante arrived with a squad of blood angels. We will defend this position. If demons break through and reach the surface, we contain them here. Appreciated, Steve said. Captain Rogers. Dante stepped closer. If this fails, if the breach opens too wide or the demons prove too numerous, we may have to destroy the tower, with all of us on it. I know. You are braver than I credited. Foolish, but brave. That's definitely going on my tombstone. Ready, Tony called out. Strange, you're up. The sorcerer took position at the device's focal point. His hands began moving through complex patterns. Power gathered around him. Not just his own magic, but energy drawn from ley lines across the planet, from artifacts at Kamartaj, from the very dimensional barriers he was about to rip open. Initiating, Strange said. His voice was strained. Everyone hold position. The device activated. Reality tore. The breach opened in low orbit, exactly where Strange aimed it. A wound in space 50 meters across. And through it, demons poured. Lesser entities at first, drawn by the sudden opening. They tumbled into real space, saw the Tyranid fleet, and attacked with mindless hunger. The Hive fleet reacted instantly. Bioforms turned to face this new threat. Bioweapons fired. Demons died, or rather, were banished back to the warp. But they kept coming, more and more, flooding through the breach. The two forces collided in orbit. Biological horror against metaphysical nightmare. The Tyranids were purely physical, adapted for consuming matter. The demons were semi-physical, existing partially outside normal reality. Neither could fully comprehend the other, so they simply tried to destroy each other with absolute commitment. It's working, Tony breathed, watching the orbital feeds. They're tearing each other apart. The Hive fleet is repositioning, Dante reported. They're pulling back from the planet, focusing on the demon threat. Close the breach, Steve ordered. Strange began the sealing ritual. But something was wrong. The breach wasn't responding. It continued to grow, feeding on the psychic energy of the battle raging around it. I can't close it, Strange said through gritted teeth. What do you mean you can't? Something's holding it open. From the other side, something big. Through the breach, a shape began to form. Massive, impossible, a greater demon. One of the true powers of the warp, drawn by the beacon of the breach and the feast of violence surrounding it. "Oh no," Tony whispered. The greater demon pushed through into real space. It was Bloodthirster, a demon of Khorne, the blood god. 30 meters of rage and brass and burning hate. It saw the Tyranids and roared with joy, an entire fleet of enemies to slaughter. It dove into the battle with a sword that burned like a star. The Hive mind recognized the threat. This wasn't just another enemy. This was a rival predator, an alpha, and the Hive mind didn't share. The entire Tyranid fleet turned its attention to the greater demon. "Strange, close that breach now," Steve shouted. "I'm trying." Strange was pouring every ounce of power he had into the sealing ritual. Wong joined him. Other sorcerers from Kamartaj added their strength. Slowly, painfully, the breach began to shrink. In orbit, the Bloodthirster fought 1,000 Tyranid bioforms at once. Its blade cut through chitin like paper. Its roar shook hulls. It was winning, but the Tyranids were adapting, learning. They started coordinating attacks, targeting its wings, limiting its mobility. The breach shrank to 20 meters. 10. 5. The Bloodthirster realized it was being sealed out. It tried to retreat back through the breach, but the Tyranids had it pinned. Massive bioforms latched onto its limbs. It roared in fury, pulling free, but more took their place. The breach closed. The Bloodthirster was trapped in real space, surrounded by the Tyranid fleet. It fought with apocalyptic fury, but it was alone, cut off from the warp, vulnerable. The Hive fleet consumed it, tore it apart, absorbed its essence, learned from it. When the feeding was done, the fleet turned its attention back to Earth. But something had changed. The bioforms were different, touched by chaos, corrupted in ways the Hive mind couldn't fully purge. "Oh God," Strange said, watching the feeds. "We just taught them about chaos." The battle ended 3 days later. The Tyranid fleet withdrew, retreating back into deep space. They'd taken too much damage, lost too much biomass. Earth wasn't worth the cost anymore, not when the prey had suddenly become dangerous in ways the Hive mind didn't understand. The victory was Pyrrhic. 12 major cities destroyed or heavily damaged, 300 million casualties. Infrastructure collapsed across multiple continents, and the corruption, both from the Tyranids and from the warp breach, would take years to fully cleanse. Captain America stood in the ruins of Times Square, looking at a city that barely resembled New York anymore. Buildings were gone, streets were craters, the famous screens were all dark, but people were alive. Rebuilding had already started. That counted for something. Captain Dante found him there as the sun rose on what might charitably be called the first day of peace. "You paid a heavy price," the Blood Angel said. "We survived." "Yes, but at what cost? Your world is damaged, your people traumatized. You've been exposed to threats you barely understand, and the next attack will come. It always does." Steve looked at him. "I know, but we'll face it. Together. Both Earths, both humanities. We learned something from this." "What did you learn?" "That you were right about some things. We needed your experience, your knowledge, your strength. But you were wrong about something too. Hope isn't weakness. It's what makes the fight worth it." Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he removed his helmet. His ancient face was tired, but something in his eyes had softened. "Perhaps. I have fought for so long I had forgotten what hope feels like. Watching your people these past weeks, seeing them refuse to surrender, refuse to give up even when the odds were impossible. It reminded me of something we lost. The Imperium survives, yes, but it no longer lives. Perhaps that is worth remembering. Stay, Steve said. Help us rebuild, not as occupiers, as partners. I will stay, for now, and we will see what kind of future two Earths can build together. They shook hands. A super soldier from World War II and a space marine from the far future. Both warriors, both defenders, both in their own way, still believing that humanity was worth fighting for. In orbit, damaged ships from both Earths worked together on repairs. On the ground, SHIELD and Imperial Guard units coordinated reconstruction. In laboratories, Tony Stark and tech priests argued about proper maintenance rituals for plasma reactors. In sanctums, Strange studied with sanctioned psychers, learning proper warp wards. The merge had broken the world, but it had also brought two humanities together, two philosophies, two visions of what survival meant. Neither was complete without the other. In the ruins, a child found a broken piece of Space Marine armor, a red pauldron with the blood drop symbol of the Blood Angels. She picked it up, carried it to her mother. The mother smiled, took the piece, and set it on a makeshift memorial already growing in the square. Pictures of the dead, flowers, candles, and now a piece of armor from the defenders who'd stood between her daughter and extinction. "Will they come back?" the child asked. "The monsters?" Her mother looked to the sky, at the fortress monastery visible in the distance, at the heroes and soldiers still standing watch. "Maybe," she said honestly, "but we'll be ready. We'll always be ready." The child nodded, satisfied, then ran off to help with the rebuilding. In the ruins of a broken world, life continued, because that's what humans did. Both versions, both Earths, they endured.